Hello there, it's Tom here, and this is a Wild West themed video for Gunnerkrigg Court Chapter 18, S1. And this is another chapter that has a lot of backgrounds taken straight from places that I've been in real life, so I'll mention them as they come along. And this first placed here, this little flashback, which basically takes place at lunchtime of Kat's first day at Gunnerkrigg in the first year. This was just a little spot that my friends and I used to hang out next to the Year 7 playground in the school I used to go to. But the beginning of the chapter shows that Kat is looking for a place to get some work done. Specifically, she's thinking about making a robot. And I wanted this little scene between her parents to seem very much like they are passing on something to their daughter, and giving the sense that when they were younger they used to be involved in similar activities and do their own thing. And I wanted their parents to seem like real people instead of obstacles or just parental figures. And on this page, Anya is almost jealous that her daughter gets to go off with her friend and essentially continue their work. But she realizes that it wouldn't be a good idea to tag along with them, and she lets them go off on their own. And there are a few flashbacks in this chapter, just to sort of give a glimpse into Kat's past, just to show what she was like before meeting Annie, and showing that her parents and Eglamour were good friends. And while they're getting a few things together, before they head off to the new workshop, they're just having a chat about Eglamour and Jones. And back in these days, there was a general theory going around the readers that Jones might be a robot in disguise, and Annie floats the idea directly, but Kat brushes it off. There's another little flashback, just showing that Kat might have been a little isolated since both of her parents are teachers and she was a really smart girl. And here, when they're off to the train station, we have a rare scene where we actually see some other kids in the court. Of course, they're here just to heckle the girls, because it looks like Annie's just walking around with a teddy bear in her bag. But it gives us a chance to bring Redardine back in the picture and have him show off a little bit, scaring off this bunch of jerks here. When they arrive after their train journey, this whole area, the workshop and the surrounding area, is directly based on the work unit that my dad used to own when he had his own business. Anya mentions that the work unit is near the West Canals, and that's because my dad's work unit was in Birmingham in the West Midlands, where there happened to be a lot of canals that used to be used for industrial transport back in the day. And this little mouse robot here, which is Robot's temporary body, is a reference to the Vacanti mouse. And the interior of Kat's work unit is basically exactly based on my dad's work unit. And I wanted Kat to have the space because I wanted her to have a place that she could always return to, where we could watch her develop her long-term projects. Now here, when they find a passageway down into a dark cellar, I wanted to be very clear that the girls had no qualms about heading straight down there. In this sort of situation, in a kid-friendly story or movie or whatever, it's very common to have a character that's very reluctant to explore unknown areas like this. And I find that kind of an overused cliche and kind of a tiring character trait. So I wanted to completely avoid that here and show that the girls are intrigued that there seems to be a stairwell leading down into an inky blackness. And instead of wasting the reader's time wondering if it's such a good idea to go down there, they just head straight down. And we get a little glimpse here that Annie is a bit more comfortable using her blinker stone at the beginning of so-called explanations as to how magical stuff works in this universe, which I'll bring up again in a little while. So once they're down there, they realize that the plug that was at the bottom of the stairwell up at the top was for these floodlights that were set up earlier. So we have a little scene where Annie and Shadow head back up to the top, leaving Kat and Renard alone by themselves, giving them an opportunity to just share a few words. And I've always liked this little scene between the two of them, just talking in the darkness, because as I recall up until now, they've not really spent much time talking to each other one-on-one. And we get the first indication here that when Renard changes from his little teddy bear form into his wolf form, that his manner also changes, which is a recurring theme that gets explored later on in the comic. And we're back to another flashback. This flashback is set in the kitchen of the house that my family used to live in when we lived back in America. It's a house that I barely remember, but it's just a small scene showing that Anya is extremely sad to find that Annie is coming to the court, because if Annie comes to the court, that means that her mom won't be coming with her, and she suggests to Kat that they should be friends. And back in present day, this was an opportunity for me to draw a bunch of fancy-looking robo guys with a little bit more flair than usual. And Kat, of course, is extremely happy to see him. They even find the early design model for Robot's body, hence the name of the chapter, S1. This is the first of the Seraf models, and Robot used to be Seraf number 13. and he's standing there holding a matador sword. But upon inspection, Kat is super disappointed to find that the robots have no conventional means of moving around or doing anything really. But they decide to try Robot's brain chip in his original body, and surprise, surprise, it comes to life, calling out the name Jean. And what follows next is a sequence of pages that I actually quite like still. I do remember that a lot of people had some trouble following what was going on in these pages, but it gave me a chance to draw some big, hulking robot creature fighting this original Seraf model. But of course my inexperience with drawing action and fighting scenes rears its head, and what happens here is the robot charges towards the small Seraf robot, who then steps out of its way, causing the large robot to fall over. Basically how a matador would get out of the way of a charging bull. And they go on fighting for a bit, but during this, both Kat and Renard notice that the fight is basically scripted and a sham. And it ends in applause for the Seraf model destroying the big bullbot, who then goes on to cut a hole in the wall and disappear down a small tunnel, which Annie and Kat both follow. And inside we see this picture, who I was hoping people would realize was the human version of the ghost down by the Annan Waters. And just to drive the point home, I have Annie say exactly that down at the bottom. But this is what she would have looked like back when she was still alive. We also find a picture of a man called Diego, and they deduce that he's possibly the original creator of the robots. And Renard stops by to drop a few words of wisdom. And because Renard is essentially a very old creature, I wanted it to seem like he's seen this sort of thing before. And upon finding this small hidden shrine to a beautiful woman, possibly set up by someone like Diego, he basically understands what's going on here. But of course not everything is answered here, and the mystery behind Jean and Diego and the robots is a very long-running theme in the comic. We also see that once Robot is placed back in his temporary body, he mentions that he had no control over himself and instantly felt hatred towards the large robot, which is kind of a hint back towards what I mentioned with Renard's body kind of affecting the way that he behaves. And here is where we talk a little bit about the history of the robots and how things might work. Robot mentions that nobody actually maintains the robots and they do that themselves, so Kat deduces that if they weren't able to reproduce these original style models, then they must have switched over to designs that are simpler. And in the end here, Kat basically comes to the conclusion that these robots must be complex in a way that she's not aware of, which is why she can't understand how they work. Renard shrugs that off as being powered by etheric means, but I just wanted to show that Kat is definitely somebody who believes that just because she doesn't know how it works doesn't mean that she's willing to just shrug it off as magic. And I'm a little bit unfair towards Kat in that regard, because if we live in a universe where magic is an observable force, then those strange rules would also be part of the rules of the universe that you live in. But by and large, the laws of physics that seem to reside in this universe are basically the same as the ones that exist in our actual real-life universe. And this is something I'll go into a bit more in the future, and there are reasons for and against why I've set it out this way. But after that, things wrap up, and Kat's determined to get started on making a new robot body for Robot. And this page here was kind of confusing to a lot of people because it's supposed to be a flashback to Chapter 2, where Annie and Kat meet for the first time, but seen from Kat's point of view. And a lot of people at the time thought that I'd uploaded the wrong page and that it was out of order. But instead, it's just showing the point where Kat decides that Annie is interesting enough to go and talk to, which is the start of their super fun adventures with each other. And we finish off with another flashback showing Anya and Annie's mom just walking away from the work unit, talking about the old robots. It was just a little way to show their friendship and show them when they were a bit younger, and dropping a few hints about Eglamour and Donnie as well. And, oh, well, it looks like I didn't do a bonus page for this chapter. Oh well, whatever, that ends Chapter 18. Come back again for Chapter 19, Power Station.